evening, wherever you're at. Hedgehog here. What you're seeing is, first of all, this was a Friday a couple weeks ago, and the video isn't of the greatest quality because this is my phone in my phone mount, and I took a wrong turn at Albuquerque. So you're going to see why and how all of that transpired. But as you can see, this is a fairly narrow road, and I'm driving my tractor in a 53 reefer behind me. And as you can see, this camera is roughly centered in the middle of the windshield. I mean, give or take a little bit. It's not perfectly centered. But I'm trying to get this as I'm going up this, but I mean, it was a absolutely beautiful day, and it was my Friday, and it was Friday, and it was my Friday. So I'm like, wow, what a beautiful day. It's too bad that the store wasn't down on the left, 2 miles ago where it was supposed to be. And so here I am pulling off, looking at my GPS, and of course it's saying, well, it's back down the hill. Well, there isn't any suitable area thus far to turn around. I got rock on one side, no guardrails on this side, and I thought, well, I'll keep going on this road, and then I'll get up here somewhere and I'll be able to turn around, not realizing where the road was actually going. And, back in the good old days of using the atlas, you would know what the roads were, you'd know the numbers, you'd kind of be able to, in some ways, get a better picture. I think the GPS has made me, a little lazy, because I'm like, well, yeah, clearly it knows where I'm going, so I'll just follow it and da-di-da, just keep it going. So, but the problem with this was, as you'll see later, as I'm driving down the road that's still in the town, and this is in a valley, and it's in Cumberland, Kentucky, and I'm in this valley, and the road was pretty narrow, and I'm like, and the valley's fairly narrow, and I'm like, it doesn't seem like there's going to be a store up here. And I always get this kind of weird feeling like, oftentimes I'll be driving along and I'll think, okay, well, yeah, there's going to be a store up here. Other times I'll be like, man, I hope there's a store up here, because it's kind of a crapshoot. You never know what you're going to get. So I'm still looking at the GPS, trying to get an accurate picture, and it's like, yeah, okay, it's down the hill. Again, these aren't good spots to turn around right here. They're not big enough. Maybe with a spotter, maybe, but you might find yourself in a really bad situation. So at this point, the best thing that I can do is I'm just going to keep motoring along here and see where I'm going to end up and how it's going to end up. And at the same time, my GPS is telling me state border ahead. And I'm like, well, what state border is this? Must be North Carolina. And anyway, these are thoughts that are going through my head. But I mean, the drive itself, it's absolutely beautiful up here. But you see, I have to go use up the whole road to make these corners. So not where I want to be in a truck by any stretch of any imagination. Did plenty of off-road driving in the oil field, which was, roads that were a lot like this. A lot of them way worse than this, but you didn't have four-wheelers to deal with, and four-wheelers meaning cars, not ATVs. But you didn't have them to deal with driving off-road, and if you came to something, it was going to be another truck, and you just worked it out. It wasn't that big a deal. So the road itself didn't really bother me. And again, it was an absolutely beautiful day, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. What a special treat this is, even though it cost me probably an hour plus, an hour plus detour as I'm kind of making my way up this mountain. And anyway, just kind of an interesting, an interesting, detour, I guess. I mean, like I said, you can look at the lighting, you can see the sun. I mean, it was like, oh wow, this is amazing. I mean, you can see how slow I'm traveling, and that's literally to watch out for cars and to, well, as you can see here, I'm going around this corner. You can't see around the next corner. There's a rock right there, so I have no other choice but to be all over the road. I couldn't stay in my lane. Otherwise, myself and or the trailer wasn't going to make it up, nor eventually down the tallest mountain in Kentucky, which I think it's 4,127 feet, I want to say, but it's very close to that. So anyway, I'm driving, and like I said, I'm really enjoying this for the most part, because there's nothing I can really do about it. There's nowhere I'm turning around, and I'm not seeing anywhere on my GPS either. So once we get up a little farther here, then it becomes apparent what the solution actually is. So, but again, I guess I hope you can enjoy the scenery and kind of be entertained by my predicament. Like I said, under different circumstances, it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And it still was beautiful, actually, even under the circumstances, just not a place where I would have said, hey, let's go take a hour plus out of my way detour and because any time costs me getting back home. So any of these extra little detours are not ideal, we'll say, especially considering it was my Friday. I mean, you want to get done with your run regardless, but I guess there's a little added pressure since it was my Friday. But this was great preparation for the rest of my day, because I later found out I could have took this nice easier route to go to my next store. Of course, I didn't know it. I just looked at my GPS. It says, well, go this way, it's this long, go this way, and it's this long. Well, there was a lot of these kind of roads going that other way. The other way was 15 or 20 minutes longer, but you only had a 5-mile stretch of bad road to deal with, where I did, I think it was just over a 60-mile run, and it took me an hour and a half, which that sucks, because you're just turning and turning and turning. So here we go. We're up at the top right here, and it's getting a little shaky, and I'm like, welcome Black Mountain, 4,001, I can't see that, 145, and I'm like, what? And then it says right here as I'm coming right around this corner, welcome to Virginia. And I get up here, and it's this beautiful, absolutely beautiful view, and these two guys are on the motorcycle, really nice fellows. And so I stop right here and get out and pop my brakes, and I go and start talking to him like, hey, he said, you keep going down this road and you're just going to end up in Appalachia. And I'm like, well, I don't want to end up there. And clearly I don't want to be up this way. Anyway, they were really nice guys, and they're like, yeah. So I talked with them, and they're like, yeah, well, you made a left at the light. You should have made a right. I'm like, well, that's awesome, because my GPS said go left, but again, you'll see those roads when I get back down there. So here I'm coming into the center of the road. I'm going to back out. I'm going to back into that overlook. And those guys are kind enough just to be looking out for me on the backside, which it was helpful. I didn't necessarily need it, but, more eyes are always better than less eyes. And so I kind of get backed in there and was able to get turned around. And, yeah, it was it was fine. I mean, there was rocks protecting me from going over the edge, suppose, should I have got close, but I wasn't going to get that close to any of those rocks. And I was concerned the ground sloped a little bit for my trailer. I was concerned about the side hill aspect of it, but I didn't really get into that. I didn't have to back that far. I just had enough to get back far enough so I could kind of get my trailer turned around or get my tractor turned around. So wasn't really too big a deal as far as backing goes. Wasn't anything real complex, but just not something you really want to be doing. Well, you wouldn't say, let's say in the morning, you wouldn't say, hey, let me set out to go to the top of the highest mountain/pass in Kentucky just for fun, and then see if I can find somewhere to turn around on a road that's not really all that turnaroundable on, not for a big truck anyway. So anyway, these guys, another thing is the audio. I was recording on my phone, of course, but in the cab it's fairly loud, and if I don't speak much louder than I normally speak, then you're not going to hear me well, and that gets exhausting. So I'll maybe have to look at some audio things I can do, or some mic kind of situation. But here I'm turned around. And it's always funny when you're going out somewhere, it seems like it takes forever to get there. Like, oh, how long is this going to take? And on the way back, always seems very short. So these guys were great help, and this fellow was up there just making sure anybody coming around the corner knew that something was going on. 4,145 feet, highest point in Kentucky. So these guys were super nice. And now my main objective was to get back down this mountain and not damage the truck, not damage the trailer, and more importantly, not damage any people, because a lot of these corners were blind and not something you really want to see. But again, there's rock all to the inside of what I'm doing here, so there's no way that you can't basically use up the whole lane. And you'll see that as I get down here, but it's so much nicer as you're traveling down the road here. And then it's like, okay, well, they told me where the store is, and literally right where I got off, I took this right after I got off this, whatever it is, highway basically, but you kind of come around. The store literally was, I could have almost thrown a rock from the overpass that I'd come over and turn down and hit the store that I was going to. Just how stupid this is. And when I got down to the bottom, I called the store, and they're like, yeah, you should have made a right there. We're right past the bridge. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. So, but like I said, anyway, it was a beautiful day. And so it wasn't bad. And again, my overriding and overarching concern was that I didn't damage any person or property coming off here, because again, all these blind corners. And luckily it was a Friday. It was, I think around 1 o'clock. And I only had one car on the way up that passed me, And then I met a group of motorcycles and 2 or 3 cars on the way down, which you'll see that here in a minute. It was a good thing, kind of exactly where it happened is where it should have happened. It could have ideally happened a little bit before, but um, it was fine, and you'll kind of see that as there's no we in here, but as I come down. But like you can see this right here, there's no way I can just take that corner. I mean, I have to come I'm out here even onto the little rumble strip. Again, just to make sure that my trailer doesn't go into those rocks or into the little bit of the ditch that's there, which wouldn't have been good. But you can see that rock right there is jutting out, and there's no way you're getting around that. My tandems were, those that you know, if your tandems on your trailer are slid all the way to the front, that's your maximum maneuverability. It's your shortest turn radius, and it's where you always want them. I mean, that's where I always want them. Maybe other guys are different, but I always want mine slid forward because I can back into tighter spots that way. I can get around corners better. I can turn better. It just makes life much easier. Conversely, if the tandems were slid all the way back, the thing drives like a cruise ship. Takes forever to turn it, takes forever to maneuver it, and you need a lot of space. You can do it if you're going down the interstate and you're just going dock to dock, depending on, well, I mean, even if you get into a dock, once you're off the interstate and you needed to move them, well, you can move them and then get right into a dock pretty easily. It doesn't matter where the dock's at. But out in these backwoods and back roads like this, I mean, it's super tight. If I hadn't had them all the way forward, it would have been a challenge. It would have been a much greater challenge, and maybe not successful either. But I wouldn't have done that. I would have just moved them, because you can move them, ideally, unless they get stuck. But I don't remember if I had to move them on this trip or not, or if I just loaded out that way. But anyway, that's kind of the story there. If the tandems are all the way to the rear, then it drives like a cruise ship. If it's all the way forward, it drives like a pickup truck, kind of. So there was an interesting story. Is it? I went on this road one time, and it was like a lane and a half wide, so narrower than this, and it was through houses, and basically that's where the GPS directed you to go. I'm like, this is just stupid. I mean, there's no shoulder, and literally it's a lane and a half, so you're stopped as far right as you can go, and a car can barely get past you. And the interesting thing is I get back out there, it's like, take a left at the Circle K, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I know where I am now. I've been here before. And I'm like, before it said, and I make the left at the Circle K, and I go down, and it says, make a right here. Before I went by that road, and I was like, well, this isn't even a truck road. I'm not going through here. What is this stupid Garmin trying to tell me to do? Well, this time I make that right, and the first is a 90 to the right, and then the next is a 90 to a left, and it's through houses. It's the same housing division, but it's not a subdivision. It's just on a road out in the country. And I get to the second corner. I get to the first corner. I don't do anything. I don't go off the road, nothing. Get to the second corner, and I'm as wide as I can possibly be. And this guy's out mowing his lawn. He comes out, and he's like, I said, look, before he even said anything, I said, look, I don't want to be on this road any more than you want me to be on this road. I said, this is horrible. I would never willingly come down a road like this. And he's like, yeah, and it gets even worse. I'm like, oh, that's fantastic. And this is in Kentucky, over in New Shepherdsville, I think it is. But I'm following along on this road, and oh, here we go. Watch this. So we got all these motorcycles coming. So we'll pick up the story in a second. I'm like, okay, that's good. That's good. And then we get to this blind corner up here. So it was good I already saw them, and there was a group. And then I'm stopped right here because I'm like, well, I'm not getting around this corner. Luckily, I didn't meet these guys in this corner, because that would have been horrible to meet those guys in that corner, because it wouldn't have went well, because they wouldn't have got stopped. I wouldn't have been able to got stopped even as slow as I was going. But so the guy says the road gets worse. I'm like, okay, great. And I think it was another Friday or something. This was a while ago. And I'm traveling along it, and I'm like, yeah, this road is horrible. And, it's just it's like the last place on earth you'd want to be is on this road that you're not supposed to be on. And I didn't willingly, obviously I willingly went on it, but I didn't purposefully set out to go out on this road because it was faster. I would never do that in a million years. I'd go the longer way, provided it was a safer route. Even if it took longer, but it was a safer route, I'd take it, because I'm more concerned about that than I am just making minutes. And he follows me to the store. We call the manager and we talk, and he's like, look, people have come down this road. They've knocked over my mailbox. I'm like, I feel for you. I said, I don't want to be on this road. Anyway, it's like, you can just come on 65 and you can just take this exit right here and come right over to this store. And I'm like, well, that's fantastic. Well, absolutely, I'll do that. And so, of course, after that, I've seen it, and I've done it. I've been back to the store twice after that, and go the other way. And it's way easier. But again, I've run into that problem with Garmin says, oh, okay, it's 20 minutes farther if you go this way. Well, when I was just over in Knoxville, it took me on another 90, a sharp 90, that had trees on the driver's side, on my driver's side, so the oncoming cars couldn't see me. And literally, I had to creep around this corner and then take it as wide as I possibly could, and I still drug my trailer in the ditch. And Garmin had to try to take me even a road, and I looked at the road, I'm like, I'm not going down that road. And then I still end up on this road. That's crappy. So it's kind of aggravating in some ways. Again, it might work great for guys that are just running city to city. But when you're off in these back roads like I am often, I don't know. Now I use my Google Map. I check my Google Map, make sure there's a store there. But like in this case, I actually did that. I checked, I looked at the address, I saw the store, and I'm like, okay, cool. So in other words, I look at the Garmin and figure out where it is I'm going, how I'm going to get there. Then I look at Google Maps, make sure there's an actual picture of the store there. So I'm confirming store address to the Google or to the Garmin address that I'm using, and comparing those two to make sure there's a store that actually exists there. I can see a picture of it. And to make sure I don't drive out into the middle of basically a road that's nothing on either side of it, this just happened to me again last Friday, which was August, 3rd, 4th, 3rd, whatever last August Friday was. And it was TN 127 as opposed to Highway 127, same address. And as I was going, I'm like, yeah, don't think there's going to be a store down here. And literally the store was like 5-6 miles down the road from the last store I'd went. All I would have to do was make a left and I would have went right to the store. So, but in this case, there were some valuable lessons learned with, as you can see, as I get down here closer, there really wasn't a lot of area to turn around down at the bottom here either. There was some area. I would have had to finagle it. which would have been fine. And that's what I should have done. I should have looked at the map a little bit better, and I should have looked at the map and saw, wait a second, this just goes up over a mountain. So that was a mistake on my part. Should have done that. But in the past, I've always got to this point where I'm like, well, I can just get up here and turn around somewhere. I'll just find some place to turn around that's acceptable. Well, this just happens to be one of those times where none of it was, a good place to turn around until you got to the top, which is where I did turn around. But so that was kind of a mistake on my part. I should have done that. I should have done, again, it's all a learning experience. So in the future, I'll just stop right there. But when I got to the very bottom, I talked to this guy. He's like, yeah, he said, we had another one of your drivers come through here, and he's like, yeah, I just helped him turn around in the middle of the road here, and wasn't in the middle of the road, because as you see, as we get to the bottom here, the road is really tight. It's really tight as well. But he was able to, yeah, here's another car. I think there's another one we're going to see too, but the road was really tight, even through the town itself. Old coal mining town, and it was kind of a neat little town. But, again, lesson learned. I should have just stopped, dropped, and rolled, and done my fire safety class. No, I should have just, in the future, and that's why I'm ever more careful about checking addresses, and if things don't seem like it's adding up, like, wait a second, I don't think there's something out here, then I'm stopping and kind of evaluating that as well. But again, all part of the learning process. So, I guess if you're not learning something every day, then I don't know what you're doing. But I think there's always things that you can learn, and there's always, we always make mistakes, and this clearly was one of my mistakes that you guys get to have a little bouncy ride along for, and you can see it. But yeah, it was still a nice day, and at the end of it, didn't cost me anything. Nothing was damaged. It was a beautiful day, and just it cost me some time, but I did actually enjoy it. And again, my barometer for success, if I could speak, my barometer for success was that if I didn't damage person nor property, then hey, it was all good. And none of that happened, so it was all good. So it was just a learning experience. And here there's a car coming right to my inside, and you can see as far as over as I can go. So in my book, it worked out well, and it was worth it, because it was neat. It's kind of neat looking back on it. And I don't know, this was 3 weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks ago, something like that. So in July 2022, we'll just say that, July of 2022. So it worked out well. And again, it was absolutely beautiful up there. So I didn't, did I set out the morning and say, gee, I'll drive up to the border of Virginia accidentally? Well, of course I didn't. It just ended up happening. But we're just about down off this, and as you can kind of see, you'll see the town. I think the town is called Benham. And then, Benham is the town before this little town that it wasn't. I was supposed to go to Cumberland, Kentucky. And even the address or the GP, even though I put in Cumberland, I didn't make a mistake. I didn't fat finger on the GPS and say, I needed to go to Cumberland Gap or something like that, suppose, or which I've done that before, where I didn't pick the right city. Yeah, I've done that. Got the T-shirt, but this wasn't one of those. I didn't input any of the address wrong, and fortunately for me, the company actually was sending me to the right address. The address was actually correct. I've had them send me to the wrong addresses, which I don't know how that happens, but they don't know the address of their own store, but that's another story for another day. So as we get down here to the bottom, you'll kind of see it's a nice little chip. You can chip from one hole to another hole, just back and forth. It's kind of a nice little thing. It'd be kind of cool to do that. So there's some areas to turn around down here. They're not, like some huge parking lot by any means, but here you go. This little chip and putt right here. Looks a lot of fun. You can just chip from one side to the other side. It would have been nice to pull in there if I had my golf clubs, of course, which I don't, but not with me by any means. So as we get down here, the actual address is right down here by the Church of Christ. And this it's not even considered Cumberland. I forget what the little town is called. It says right there, and I can't read it. It's too blurry. But the address was literally like right down here. But even as I'm coming through here initially, I'm looking and saying that, what are the odds? It doesn't seem like there's going to be a store out this way. I mean, we have some stores that are in the boonies, but, yeah, it was right here. I think it's where it was supposed to be, somewhere in here. But anyway, we have some stores that are in the boonies, but not, I mean, this is just wild because, again, it's not even the right town, and that's where the GPS takes me to. Yeah, it's actually right down here. It's right in this area is where the GPS address was. I'm like, what? But as you get down here into the town, you'll see, because this town, there literally is a sidewalk right next to the road. There's no shoulder. The motorcycle guys come by right here because I stopped here and called the store, and they're like, yeah, it's just right up here. And the motorcycle guys stopped down here. I said, yeah, I'm good. I'm just calling. And but they were nice enough to stop. And I mean, just super nice guys. It's nice to run into people like that. But as you can see, this is the road through this town. And as I'm traveling the opposite way, and the store is, behind me, allegedly. This is the town I'm driving through. I'm like, oh, I see. Sure, the road's just going to open up and there's going to be a store in here somewhere. Because, as I'm going through, it's, not making much sense. But I'm like, well, again, I've had it where I'm hoping there's a store out there. And then there is. And then in this case, I'm just looking and I'm thinking, well, there's no way that there's a store in here. Just isn't going to happen. But I'm like, well, I've seen it happen, so I can't just dismiss it and say, well, there isn't any store out here when I'm, this close. But this road is really tight. And again, this is, and those are my thoughts as I'm heading up to the Virginia border, coming through. But anyway, this gives you a good idea of what I was seeing. It's a nice little town. Case was born here, and something else. I think that's Cumberland. It said Case, and I forget the other company. But anyway, as you can see, there's a sidewalk and there's a road. There's no shoulder. And it's in this tight little valley. I did think it was interesting up here. There's a coal tour, which would be kind of neat to kind of see. You see all these old buildings on the left, old abandoned buildings, all coal stuff. but just up here is a coal tour. But I thought it was funny on the way up. I'm looking and it says there's a creek running through, and it says no fishing at the creek. It's like, I wonder why people wouldn't want to fish in a creek that had been through a coal town. It didn't make much sense to me. I mean, of course you wouldn't fish in that creek, but I guess, you need to tell people. Anyway, this is, what do they call it? The portal. There is a coal drill on the right, drill into the face. Portal, whatever. Anyway, a coal mine. So, anyway, this leads right back to the store that I should have been at. At this point, it's 45 minutes ago, I think. We want to just look at what the video was. It was a little bit longer than that, because this isn't the whole video. But as you can see, it's like I said, it's a nice little town, but there's not a store that's down there. And so that ultimately was what I was after. So, at any rate, I think I've talked enough. So at this point, it's been almost 37 minutes. So yeah, it cost me a good hour, we'll say. And you guys can enjoy the rest of this little video tour for what it's worth. And I will catch you later. So we'll see you. So here's the after-action summary of what went on today. So once I drove past the store, in hindsight, I just need to do this in the future. I should have just stopped right there, but I'm like, well, there isn't really any place for me to stop. There was a couple spots that I probably could have got turned around in. It was pretty tight, but still could have got turned around in them. So I guess the reality is, if it says the location's right there, it's not, then stop, drop, and roll. And that's what I should have done. But anyway, I got a nice scenic detour, and so there's that. So at the end of the day, I learned a lesson, and keep on trucking. We'll see you guys later. Bye.